Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. 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 And indeed it has.
When the BBC lie, it's usually about big things. The lesser-known third tower to fall on 9/11, for example. World Trade Center Building 7, also known as the Salomon Brothers building, was not hit by any aircraft, suffered relatively minor office fires, which would make what happened at 5:20 on 9/11 all the more alarming. Standing at over 600 feet, Building 7 comprised 47 stories of steel structure, even housing a reinforced emergency bunker for the Mayor of New York, and also home to the Securities and Exchange Commission, even a CIA field office. Somewhat more surprising about the collapse, it would later be confirmed this building met absolutely zero resistance to its descent for 2¼ seconds, commonly known as free fall. This means, for around 8 stories or approximately 100 feet, Building 7 was falling through nothing but fresh air. But if you think that's strange, let's back up 20 minutes. Not only did the BBC report the collapse of this building with an explanation for it, they broadcast, live on air, a full 22 minutes prior to the event itself. And let's count just how many times they gave us a confirmation 7 had fallen and why. As we'll see shortly, this is an important thing to count.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off.
The BBC never denied they reported the suspicious collapse before it even happened, but their explanation for that is completely fictional, and where the lies begin. On February the 27th, 2007, online, the BBC news editor Richard Porter authored a supposed exculpation for their clairvoyant powers. We did what we always did, sourced our reports, used qualifying words like apparently or it's reported, or we're hearing, and constantly tried to check and double-check the information we were receiving. I don't know about you, but I counted at least 8 confident affirmations that Building 7 had collapsed, and all well before it had. Words like apparently or we're hearing were nowhere in the report he's certainly referring to. But lying seems to have served Mr. Porter well, as he's now Director of Internal Communications and Business Information Services at European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. As if the online excuse for making TV history with a report on stuff that's not even happened yet weren't sufficient, the BBC would then launch a campaign against the most vital piece of scientific evidence which proves the collapse of Building 7 was exactly like it looked. Freefall is only possible due to a controlled demolition, necessitating weeks, if not longer, of planning, foreknowledge, and thus complicity in the 9/11 attacks. Again, the BBC would lie through their teeth and with a shameless demonstration of falsified maths, use licence payers' money to embroider the myriad untruths surrounding the murder of 67 Brits on 9/11, amongst nearly 3,000 others, including a 2-year-old girl.
And what's more, the building did not collapse at free fall speed. The scientists timed the fall of the top 17 floors before they disappeared from view. It took 5.4 seconds. A free fall collapse would have taken 3.9 seconds.
Unfortunately for the BBC, an inconvenient high school physics teacher, using inexpensive computer software, proved them wrong again. This time, the empirical data compiled by David Chandler forced the official investigators at the National Institute for Standards and Technology to quietly amend their initial report into Building 7, where they tucked away the freefall on page 48, like some poor relation. Yet while still adhering to their ludicrous assertion the building fell due to normal office fires, they refused to release their working data for scientific peer review. Naturally, the BBC breached its own editorial guidelines, and to this day have not corrected their fraudulent sums on arguably the most important fact of modern times. Again, also ignored by the BBC, the engineering department at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, Professor Leroy Halsey and his team of PhD students undertook a $300,000 4-year study into the catastrophic destruction of Building 7, concluding only last year what every rational individual knew, that this building could never have fallen due to office fires. And in November last year, a grand jury petition for a new investigation into 9/11 was accepted by the US Attorney for Southern New York, and at the risk of repetition, was ignored completely by BBC News, as if this was of no significance or importance to its paying viewer. But this won't be the first time 9/11 has been to court. In 2013, yours truly, having refused to pay my TV license for 7 years because I knew the BBC was lying about Building 7, stood before a judge and fared pretty well. Richard Porter, despite my invitation to attend, declined. But maybe he didn't want to answer questions about this.
And our analysis showed that even the smallest explosive charge that was capable of bringing down the critical column in the building, had it occurred, we would have seen sound levels of 120 to 130 decibels about a half a mile away. That would have been an incredibly loud sound, and that sound was not picked up by any of the videos or witnesses that we have talked to.
Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something? You gotta get back. You know that. You gotta get back. All right. You know that. You gotta get back. All right. You know that. You gotta get back. All right. Don't worry. The 4-1 should have taken a couple of companies that they were leaving back to us. Go against another. You hear that?
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Moving back.
All right, guys. Sorry.
We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up.
That sound was not picked up by any of the videos or witnesses that we have talked to.
Mr. Huxley was right. When you consider taking the COVID vaccine for an alleged virus with a less than 0.5% mortality rate, and not only that, but from the UK manufacturer AstraZeneca, the corporate version of Harold Shipman, remember that the BBC didn't tell you about their litany of health offences, their consumer fraud, their bribes, their kickbacks to health officials around the world, not to mention their government contract violations and sex crimes against female employees. Like they didn't tell you the truth about Building 7, so why should they start now? Especially when AstraZeneca, being funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the same foundation that makes very generous donations to the BBC, thus ensuring very positive PR, despite the BBC being an allegedly independent and impartial organisation. Since 9/11, the United Kingdom has seen 5 prime ministers, each one of them demonstrable suspects in the 9/11 cover-up, and thus implicated in serious crimes against both us and the millions we've bombed and murdered, all based on a false pretext of monumental implications. As for the porcine prick currently presiding over what is undoubtedly another lie and an attack against democracy and a threat to our very lives, he's on borrowed time. We are millions, they are few, and their cavalry are going to wake up, sooner or later. Because we want our country back.